She gave this company 25 years of her life. She knew every secret, every password, every unspoken rule. But to the new management, Evelyn Reed was just a disposable relic, a line item on a budget sheet. They thought firing her would be easy. Quiet. They had no idea the quiet one had been watching them all along. And what her hidden camera recorded the day they fired her didn't just reveal a crime. It revealed the stunning truth about who she really was. Get ready for a story about loyalty and justice and the quiet strength of a woman everyone underestimated. Before we witness Evelyn's story unfold, make sure you're part of our community of inspiration and justice. Subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. This helps us bring more powerful, real-life stories like this one directly to you. The sky over the city was a dull, morning gray, reflecting perfectly in the immense glass facade of the Viridian Dynamics Tower. Inside, on the 42nd floor, the air hummed with the silent, expensive energy of success. For 25 years, Evelyn Reed had been a part of that hum, a constant, reliable frequency in the ever-changing symphony of corporate life. At 50 years old, she moved through the sleek, modern corridors with a quiet grace that spoke of decades of experience. She knew where every wire was hidden, every secret was kept, and every coffee preference was memorized. She was the institution behind the institution. That morning, Evelyn was preparing the Olympus conference room for a meeting that everyone was whispering about. The future of Viridian Dynamics hinged on a merger with a Japanese firm, Tanaka Holdings. The air was thick with a tension that no air purifier could scrub away. Evelyn's hands, adorned only with a simple silver band, moved with practiced efficiency. She aligned the water bottles so their labels faced perfectly outward, adjusted the leather chairs to an exact and equal distance from the table, and tested the holographic projector until its light was crystal clear. Her focus was absolute, a silent meditation in the eye of a coming storm. The storm's name was Jason Crow. The new CEO, a man of 45 who wore his ambition like expensive cologne, had been brought in 6 months ago to invigorate and streamline the company. To Evelyn, he had always been polite, but it was a cold, distant politeness, the kind one offers a useful piece of furniture. He saw people as assets on a balance sheet, and he was ruthless in cutting liabilities. Lately, Evelyn had felt his gaze lingering on her, calculating, assessing. She had a senior salary, full benefits, and was 2 months away from her full retirement vesting. In Jason Crow's new world order, she was a prime target for a hostile takeover of her own life. As she polished a faint smudge on the table's mahogany surface, her eyes flickered almost imperceptibly upward to a specific ceiling tile. To anyone else, it was identical to all the others. But Evelyn saw the tiny, nearly invisible pinhole she had carefully made, and behind it, a faint, steady green light glowed in the darkness. A secret she held close, a quiet insurance policy she'd never imagined she would need to use. Her personal phone, buried in her pocket, vibrated softly. A text from her daughter, Chloe, lit up the screen. "Mom, don't forget to call the doctor's office back today. Love you." The message was a stark reminder of the world outside these glass walls, a world of mounting medical bills and a recent, worrying diagnosis that demanded a surgery her insurance wouldn't fully cover for another 2 months. This job, the security, wasn't just her life. It was her lifeline. The sharp ding of the executive elevator broke her reverie. Jason Crow strode out, followed by his ever-nervous VP, Mark. Crow's suit was impeccably tailored, his smile a weapon he wielded with precision. He barely glanced at Evelyn, his mind already in the boardroom. "Is everything prepared, Evelyn?" he asked, his voice a clipped, efficient instrument. He didn't wait for an answer. "The Tanaka team will be here in 5 minutes. I want absolute silence. No interruptions. No calls. Nothing gets in or out." "Understood." "Perfectly, Mr. Crow," Evelyn replied, her voice a model of calm neutrality, perfected over a quarter of a century. He paused, turning to fully face her. His eyes, a cool shade of blue, scanned her from head to toe, and for a fleeting moment, Evelyn felt a chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. It was the look of a surgeon identifying a tumor. "Good. After the meeting, come to my office." We need to discuss your role moving forward with the company. The words were delivered with a deliberate, almost rehearsed casualness that made her blood run cold. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a summons to an execution. She simply nodded, her professional mask firmly in place. Of course. The meeting began behind the soundproof glass. From her desk, Evelyn could see the pantomime of power inside. Crow was a picture of charm and confidence, smiling, presenting data, shaking hands. But Evelyn, who had spent a lifetime reading the unspoken language of the boardroom, saw the cracks. She saw the subtle twitch in his jaw when a question was asked, the way his fingers drummed a frantic rhythm on the table when he thought no one was looking, the fleeting glances he exchanged with his VP, Mark. This deal was not going well. The polite bows and the Tanaka representatives seemed stiff, their smiles not reaching their eyes. When the meeting concluded and the Japanese executives were escorted out, the silence they left behind was heavier than any noise. Jason Crow's face, once the mask of congeniality, was now a thunderous scowl. He marched straight toward her, his eyes dark. "My office. Now," he commanded, not breaking his stride. The walk to the corner office felt endless. A perp walked past the hushed cubicles of her colleagues. She entered the spacious, minimalist room. He did not offer her a seat. "Evelyn," he began, leaning against his desk, adopting a pose of feigned regret. "You've been a tremendously loyal employee to Viridian. Your service is noted and appreciated." The preamble was a corporate formulaic kiss of death. But as you know, the company is evolving. We're digitalizing, automating, embracing a more dynamic and agile workflow. We have to make tough choices to stay competitive. It is with sincere regret that I must inform you your position is being made redundant, effective immediately. The words redundant, agile, dynamic were empty shells designed to sanitize the brutality of the act. He was firing her. 2 months short of her full retirement. 2 months short of the insurance that would save her. She felt the world tilt, but her spine remained straight. "I see," she said, her voice surprisingly steady, betraying none of the panic screaming inside her head. "HR has prepared a generous severance package," he said, sliding a white folder across the polished surface of his desk. It was a coffin for her career. "Security will escort you to collect your personal effects. Please surrender your key card and company phone on your way out." The humiliation was swift, public, and designed to be a warning to everyone else. Under the watchful gaze of stoic security guard, Evelyn placed a single-framed photo of her daughter, a favorite ceramic mug, and a well-worn copy To Kill a Mockingbird into a small cardboard box. Her colleagues, people she had celebrated birthdays and mourned losses with, could not meet her eye. The fear in the air was palpable. If it could happen to Evelyn, it could happen to anyone. But as she was walked to the elevator for the final time, a strange calm settled over her. The initial shock was replaced by a cold, sharp resolve. Her fingers brushed against her personal phone in her pocket. With a subtle movement she had practiced, she opened a specific, disguised app and pressed a single button, activating a remote backup sequence. She didn't know what, if anything, her hidden camera had recorded, but as the elevator doors closed on her old life, she had a sinking feeling that the real meeting, the one that had sealed her fate and perhaps the fate of Viridian itself, had happened in that conference room after the Tanaka team had left. And she, the invisible woman, had been the only one watching. The elevator's descent was a silent, gravity-driven funeral procession for Evelyn Reed's career. The security guard, a young man named Luis who she'd always greeted with a warm good morning, stared rigidly at the polished bronze doors, unable to look at her. The box in her arms felt like it contained the ashes of her past 25 years, not just a few personal items. The hum of the elevator cable was the only sound, a monotonous drone that underscored the surreal nightmare of the last hour. When the door slid open onto the pristine, marble-floored lobby, the world seemed to have changed its colors. The morning light streaming through the massive windows was too bright, too cheerful. People in sharp business attire rushed past, their conversations a blur of meaningless noise. She was an island of stillness in a river of purpose, and the current was pushing her out. Luis walked her to the main revolving door. "I'm sorry, Ms. Reed," he mumbled, his voice barely audible. It was a small kindness, a pinprick of light in the overwhelming darkness. "Thank you, Luis," she said, her voice surprisingly even. "Take care of yourself." And then she was outside. The city's cacophony hit her like a physical wave. Honking taxis, the rumble of the subway deep below, snippets of 1,000 conversations. She stood on the sidewalk, clutching her box, feeling utterly exposed and anchorless. For 25 years, her life had been structured by the rhythms of Viridian dynamics. The 7:15 a.m. train, the 6:30 p.m. elevator ride down. Now, time stretched before her, empty and terrifying. She walked without a destination, her heels clicking a hollow rhythm on the pavement. The cold weight of her phone in her coat pocket was a persistent reminder. The app, the camera, what had it seen? The urge to look was a physical pull, but a deeper, more primal instinct told her to wait. She was in public. This wasn't a secret to be uncovered on a busy street corner. She needed sanctuary. She found in the hushed, dim quiet of the public library an old, beautiful building that stood in stark contrast to the glass and steel of Viridian. She found a secluded corral in a far corner, surrounded by the smell of old paper and quiet wisdom. Her hands trembled slightly as she set the box down and pulled out her phone. Opening the app felt like disarming a bomb. The interface was simple, a direct link to the small, high-resolution camera she had hidden months ago. It had started as a pang of paranoia after Crow's arrival, a feeling that the ethical foundations of the company she loved were being corroded. She'd never intended to use it for anything but her own peace of mind. Now, it might be the only thing she had left. The app showed a list of recorded files, time-stamped for that day. Her heart hammered against her ribs. There was the main meeting with the Tanaka team, but her eyes were drawn to a second file, recorded immediately after. The timestamp showed it began just 3 minutes after the Tanaka executives had been escorted to the elevator. The meeting wasn't over. She plugged in her earbuds, her breath catching in her throat. She tapped play. The video quality was stunningly clear. The camera's angle from the center of the ceiling gave a perfect view of the entire table. The room was empty for a moment. Then the door burst open and Jason Crow stormed in, followed by his VP, Mark, and the company's slick and moral lawyer, David Chun. Crow's composed CEO facade was completely gone. His face was contorted with rage. He slammed his fist on the table, making the water bottles Evelyn had so carefully arranged jump. "They knew!" Crow snarled, pacing like a caged animal. "Every single one of our bottom-line projections. They knew about the factory closures in Ohio before we'd even filed the paperwork. How the hell did that happen?" Mark looked pale, sweating. "Jason, we can still salvage this. We can adjust the offer, take a smaller percentage." "Salvage." Crow spat the word. "This isn't about salvaging a deal, you idiot. This is about a leak. A massive, catastrophic breach of confidentiality. Tanaka didn't just walk away from a bad offer. They walked away because they think we're incompetent. Or worse, that we're trying to screw them with hidden liabilities." David Chun, cool and analytical, steepled his fingers. "We need to contain this. Immediately, we identify the source of the leak and we eliminate it. Permanently. The SEC cannot get a whiff of this. Insider trading, breach of fiduciary duty. The implications are staggering." Crow stopped his pacing, a dark, calculating look settling on his features. "It has to be someone with high-level access. Someone who saw all the documents, all the emails." Then Mark, eager to please, to provide a solution, spoke the words that turned Evelyn's blood to ice. "What about Reed? She processes all your confidential memos. She has the master key to the digital archive. She's been here forever. Thinks she owns a place. Maybe she got sloppy. Talked to the wrong person." Crow's eyes lit up with vicious opportunity. It wasn't about truth. It was about convenience. It was about a narrative. The old secretary, perfect, disgruntled, nearing retirement, resistant to change. It's believable. He turned to Chun. "Can we make it stick?" Chun nodded slowly, a predator's smile playing on his lips. "We don't have to make it stick. In a court of law, Jason. We just have to make it stick in the court of public opinion. And for the board, we fire her for gross negligence. We cite a pattern of careless behavior with sensitive documents. We make a big show of tightening our security protocols in the wake of her dismissal. It doesn't just solve the leak problem. It makes you look decisive. A leader cleaning house. The three men looked at each other, a silent pact of lies forming in the expensive, air-conditioned air. Do it, Crow said, his voice cold and final. Fire her today. And draft a statement for the internal team. I want everyone to know that the problem has been found and eliminated. Evelyn sat frozen in the library corral, the world around her fading away. The sound of pages turning and soft footsteps vanished. She wasn't just a redundant employee. She was a patsy, a scapegoat for their own failure. They had not only stolen her job and her security, but they were about to assassinate her character, to paint her as an incompetent old woman who had betrayed the company she dedicated her life to. The medical bills, the surgery, her retirement, it all crumbled to dust under the weight of this new, horrifying reality. They weren't just throwing her out. They were planning to bury her. A tear of pure, white-hot anger finally escaped and traced a path down her cheek. But she didn't feel despair. Not anymore. The cold resolve that had settled over her in the elevator now solidified into something harder, sharper. They had underestimated the quiet woman in the corner. They thought she was helpless. They thought she would disappear. They had no idea that Evelyn Reed now held the one piece of evidence that could destroy them all. She had the truth, and she had absolutely nothing left to lose. The library's profound silence, once a comfort, now felt like a vacuum, sealing Evelyn in a bubble of shocking revelation. The genteel sounds of turning pages and soft-shoed librarians were a bizarre soundtrack to conspiracy she had just witnessed. On the small screen of her phone, the three men, Crow, Mark, and Chun, continued their meeting, moving from cold calculation to jovial backslapping now that their plan was set. They were celebrating her professional execution. The disconnect was so profound it made her feel physically ill. She stopped the video. She couldn't watch another second. Her hands, which had been trembling with shock, now grew still. A strange, icy calm descended upon her. The initial sting of betrayal was cauterized by a rising, ferocious heat. It was no longer about hurt feelings or unfair dismissal. This was war. They had chosen to make her the enemy, and she would show them what a lifetime of loyalty, when betrayed, could truly become. But what to do with the truth? It was a weapon, yes, but a dangerous one. If she wielded it clumsily, it would be turned against her. Crow and Chun would have a team of lawyers ready to pounce. They would claim the video was fabricated, that it was an illegal recording, that she was a disgruntled ex-employee seeking revenge. They would bury her in legal motions until she had nothing left, not even a will to fight. She couldn't go to the media, not yet. It would be a sensational story for a day, but Viridian's PR machine would spin it into oblivion. She needed leverage. She needed an ally on the inside, someone with power who would be equally appalled by this blatant corruption. Her mind raced through the organizational chart she knew by heart. The board of directors. They were her only hope. Specifically, Arthur Pembroke. The name came to her like a lifeline. Arthur Pembroke was the former CEO, the man who had hired her 25 years ago. He was old school, a man of principle who had built Viridian on a foundation of integrity before retiring to a chairman emeritus role. He was still on the board, a respected voice, though Crow likely considered him a dinosaur to be humored. Most importantly, he knew Evelyn. He knew her character, her unwavering loyalty, her meticulous nature. He would never believe she was capable of gross negligence. But getting to him was a challenge. She couldn't just call his private line. Crow's narrative of her being a careless security risk would already be spreading. Any communication from her would be seen as proof of her instability. She needed a way to get the video to him directly, without it being intercepted. She thought of his executive assistant, Maria. They had worked together for years, a silent alliance of women who kept the cogs of the corporate machine turning. It was a risk. Trusting anyone was a risk. But Maria was fiercely loyal to Arthur, not to Crow. Evelyn took a deep breath, her mind formulating a plan. It was audacious. It had to be. She opened a new email account, an anonymous, encrypted service she set up right there in the library corral. Her fingers flew over the keyboard, each tap filled with purpose. To Maria.Espinoza@PembrokeFoundation.org, Arthur's personal charity, an email Crow's team would likely not monitor. From truthofviridian@mail.com. Subject: urgent and confidential matter from Mr. Pembroke's eyes only. Message: Maria, please forgive the cryptic nature of this message. This is Evelyn Reed. By now, you will have heard that I was terminated today by Jason Crow for alleged gross negligence. What I am about to tell you is the truth. Jason Crow, Mark Higgins, and David Chen are engaged in a conspiracy to cover up a catastrophic security leak that endangered the Tanaka merger. They have chosen to scapegoat me for their failures. I have irrefutable proof of this conspiracy, captured in a recorded meeting that took place in the Olympus conference room today after the Tanaka team departed. I need to get this evidence to Mr. Pembroke directly. His reputation and the future of the company he built are at stake. I am attaching a short 3-minute clip from the recording. Please review it yourself first. You will understand the severity of the situation. I will be at the Starbucks on 5th and Grand at 2 p.m. today. If Mr. Pembroke wishes to see the full recording and hear what I have to say, please have someone meet me there. I will wait for 1 hour only. This is not a game. Please be discreet. Evelyn. She attached the most damning 3-minute segment, where Crow explicitly agreed to frame her as the perfect patsy. She hovered her finger over the send button, a final moment of doubt gripping her. Was she dragging Maria into this? Was she putting a target on her back too? But the image of Crow's smug, ruthless face flashed in her mind. She pressed send. The next few hours were an agony of suspense. She left the library, her box of belongings under her arm, and found a quiet diner a few blocks away. She ordered coffee she didn't drink and watched the clock tick toward 2. Every person who walked past the window made her heart jump. What if Maria went straight to Crow? What if this was a trap? At 1:55 p.m., she took a seat at a small table in the back of the designated Starbucks, her back to the wall, so she could see the entrance. The place was bustling with the afternoon crowd, a perfect cloak of anonymity. At 2:07 p.m., the door opened, but it wasn't a corporate lackey or a security guard. It was Arthur Pembroke himself. He looked older than she remembered, but he carried himself with the same quiet authority. He was dressed in a tweed jacket, not a business suit, and he scanned the room with a sharp, perceptive gaze. When his eyes found hers, there was no anger, no suspicion. There was only a deep, grave concern. He walked over and sat down opposite her, not saying a word. He placed his phone on the table. On the screen was a pause video, the clip she had sent. "Evelyn," he said, his voice low and steady. "Maria showed me the email. I've seen the clip." He paused, his jaw tightening. "Now, I need you to tell me everything, and I need to see the rest." For the first time since she'd been marched out of Viridian Tower, Evelyn Reed felt a flicker of hope. The cavalry had arrived, and he was furious. The ambient chatter of the coffee shop, the hiss of the espresso machine, the clinking of cups, it all faded into a distant hum. For a long moment, Evelyn and Arthur Pembroke simply looked at each other across the small table. The gravity in his eyes confirmed everything. He believed her. The relief that washed over her was so potent it felt like a physical force, threatening to buckle her carefully maintained composure. She had been adrift in a sea of lies, and he was a solid, unmovable shore. "Thank you for coming, Mr. Pembroke," Evelyn began, her voice softer than she intended, betraying the emotional toll of the day. "Arthur—" "Please, Evelyn," he corrected gently, his tone shifting from grave to resolute. "The man who gets to call you Miss Reed in that building fired you today. I am here as your friend, and as someone who is apparently witnessing the attempted murder of the company I spent my life building." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Now, from the beginning, leave nothing out." And so she did. She started with Crow's cold summons, the brutal efficiency of her firing, the public walk of shame. She described the hidden camera not as an act of espionage, but as a symptom of the growing unease she'd felt since his arrival, a need to protect herself in an environment that was becoming ethically unmoored. She told him about her daughter, Chloe, and a medical diagnosis that made her job and insurance a lifeline Crow had just callously severed. She held his gaze, letting him see the raw truth of her situation. When she finished, Arthur Pembroke's face was a mass of controlled fury. He stared at his hands, clenched on the tabletop, the knuckles white. "I sat on the committee that hired that man," he said more to himself than to her. "We were promised a shark. We got a piranha. He's eating the company from the inside out." He looked up, his eyes sharp. "And he thinks he can do this to one of my people. To you." He took her phone, and together they watched the full, unedited recording. Evelyn saw the anger on Arthur's face deepen with every damning word from Crow, Chun, and Mark. He flinched when they casually discussed ruining her reputation. When the video ended, he handed the phone back to her as if it were a sacred object. "This is more than just a personnel issue," Arthur stated, his mind already racing through strategies Evelyn couldn't even conceive. "This is a direct violation of fiduciary duty to the shareholders and a blatant case of wrongful termination and defamation. The leak they're so frantic about is their own incompetence, and their solution is to destroy a loyal employee to cover it up. It's despicable." He pulled out his own phone. "We need to move quickly. Crow will be acting to cement his narrative. The internal memo painting you as a security risk has probably already been drafted." He scrolled through his contacts, not looking up. "I am calling an emergency meeting of the board's audit committee. 3 members. They're the only ones with the authority to act this fast, and they answer directly to the full board, not to Crow. We will meet tonight." Evelyn's heart leapt into her throat. "Tonight? But how?" "Leave that to me," Arthur said, a glint of his old CO steel in his eyes. He made a call, his voice calm but leaving no room for argument. "Susan? Arthur, I need you, Ben, and Charles on secure video conference at 8 p.m. sharp. No excuses. It pertains to a catastrophic breach of governance and a direct legal threat to the company. The subject is Jason Crow." "Yes, I am serious." "Thank you." He ended the call and looked at Evelyn. "You will be on that call. Evelyn, you will present your evidence. You will answer their questions. They are tough, fair-minded people. They will see the truth." The plan was terrifying and exhilarating. From fired secretary to star witness before the board's most powerful committee in a matter of hours. "What do I need to do?" she asked, her voice steady now, matching his resolve. "You need to be ready," he said. "Go home. Try to rest. I will have a car sent for you at 7:30 to bring you to my home office. We will connect to the call from there. It's secure. Do not speak to anyone from Viridian. Do not answer unknown numbers. Consider yourself in pre-trial sequestration." He managed a small, reassuring smile. "You have the truth on your side, Evelyn. That is a more powerful weapon than any title or stock option." The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. Evelyn went home to her small, quiet apartment. The box of her belongings sat by the door, a painful reminder of the life that had been taken from her. But now, it was also a symbol of what she was fighting to get back. Not just her job, but her name. She tried to eat, but couldn't. She tried to watch television, but saw nothing. Her mind was rehearsing what she would say, anticipating the questions a committee might ask. Would they focus on the legality of the recording? Would they try to protect the company's image above all else? Arthur's faith in them was her only comfort. At 7:30 p.m. precisely, a sleek, black sedan pulled up outside her building. A professional driver nodded to her and held the door open. The silent ride to the city felt like being transported to a battlefield. Arthur Pembroke's home was an elegant, old-world brownstone. His study was a room of deep leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, and a sense of settled history. A large monitor was set up on his desk. He greeted her warmly. "They're connecting in 5 minutes. Remember, just be clear. Be factual. You're not on trial. They are." At 8 p.m. exactly, the screen flickered to life. 3 faces appeared in individual boxes. Susan Wright, a formidable woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense haircut. Ben Carter, a man who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. And Charles Moore, whose expression was one of deep concern. Arthur began without preamble. "Thank you for joining on short notice. I've called this meeting because we have a code black governance situation. With me is Evelyn Reed, who was terminated by Jason Crow earlier today. She has evidence that her termination was not only wrongful, but part of a conspiracy to cover up executive failures that jeopardize the Tanaka merger and potentially violate SEC regulations. Evelyn, please proceed. Evelyn took a steadying breath. She leaned toward the camera, her face calm and determined on their screens. She saw skepticism in Ben's eyes, curiosity in Susan's, and worry in Charles's. "Good evening," she began, her voice clear and unwavering. "What you are about to see was recorded in the Olympus conference room at 11:17 a.m. today, approximately 3 minutes after the Tanaka Holdings delegation departed." She played the video. As the voices of Crow, Chun, and Mark filled the quiet study, the faces on the screen transformed. Skepticism melted into shock. Curiosity hardened into anger. Worry deepened into grim outrage. They saw it all. The rage, the cowardice, the cold, calculated decision to sacrifice a loyal employee. When the video ended, the silence on the call was absolute. It was Susan Wright who spoke first, her voice cold enough to freeze the screen. "Arthur," she said, "where's Jason Crow right now?" The silence on the video call was thick enough to feel a pressurized void waiting to be filled. On the screen, the faces of the 3 audit committee members were frozen in various stages of disbelief and dawning fury. Susan Wright's question hung in the air, a blade poised to fall. "Arthur, where is Jason Crow right now?" Arthur Pembroke didn't miss a beat. Based on his calendar, he should be at the charity gala at the Metropolitan Club, taking a victory lap for a merger he just sank, he said, his voice dripping with contempt. Susan's eyes narrowed. "Ben, Charles, are we in agreement?" The 2 men, their initial shock now replaced by a steely resolve, nodded grimly. "Good. Arthur, keep that evidence secure." "Ms. Reed," she said, turning her gaze to Evelyn, "the company owes you a profound apology. Please remain with Arthur. This will be handled. Now." The screen went black. The call was over. The silence in Arthur's study was now their own. Evelyn felt a tremor run through her hands. It was one thing to have evidence, another to have unleashed the full, quiet power of a corporate board in motion. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Now," Arthur said, a faint, hard smile touching his lips. "We let the system work, and we watch." He poured them both a glass of water from a crystal pitcher. The minutes ticked by, each one feeling like an hour. Evelyn's mind raced, imagining the flurry of calls being made, the quiet directives issued. She was no longer a pawn in their game. She had become the player who tipped the board over. Meanwhile, at the glittering Metropolitan Club, Jason Crow was indeed holding court, a glass of single malt scotch in his hand. He was regaling a circle of investors with a sanitized version of the day's events, painting himself as a decisive leader making tough calls for the health of the company. His phone, set to silent, vibrated incessantly in his pocket. He ignored it. Mark, standing nervously at his elbow, checked his own phone. His face paled. "Jason," he hissed, "it's Susan Wright. She's called 3 times. And I just got a notification. My access to the internal server has been revoked." Crow's smile tightened. "A glitch," he muttered dismissively, but a flicker of unease crossed his face. He excused himself and stepped into a quiet alcove, finally looking at his phone. Dozens of missed calls, not just from Susan, but from other board members, and one text message from David Chun, the lawyer, that made his blood run cold. "Call me immediately. They know." Before he could process the message, 2 men in dark suits approached him. They weren't security guards. They were sharper, more imposing. "Mr. Crow." The first one said, his voice low and devoid of emotion, "I'm Robert Hill, Internal Security. Please come with us. There's a car waiting." "This is highly irregular," Crow blustered, his voice losing its commanding edge. "I'm in the middle of an event. The board has convened an emergency meeting. You are required to attend." "Immediately," the man said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Across the room, Crow saw Mark being escorted out by 2 other men. his face a mask of sheer panic. The spectacle was subtle but unmistakable to those watching. The king was being dethroned, right in the middle of his own court. Back in Arthur's study, his personal phone rang. It was Susan again on speakerphone. "It's done. They're being brought to the boardroom now. We're convening virtually. We like you and Ms. Reed to join us." Within minutes, they were back on the monitor. This time, the screen was filled with the faces of the entire board of directors. They were gathered in the very same Olympus conference room Evelyn had left in disgrace that morning. Jason Crow, Mark, and David Chin sat on one side of the table, looking like defendants in a dock. Their arrogance had been replaced with a sickly pallor. Susan Wright presided. This emergency meeting of the full board is called to order. The sole agenda item is the immediate termination of Jason Crow, Mark Higgins, and David Chin for gross misconduct, breach of fiduciary duty, and conspiracy to defraud the company. She turned her gaze to the camera. "Ms. Reed, the floor is yours." For the second time that night, Evelyn told her story. But this time, she was not a supplicant asking to be believed. She was a witness delivering testimony. She played the recording again. In the boardroom, the effect was electric. Gasps were heard. Directors stared in open disgust at the three men. When the video ended, Crow tried to speak. "This is a legally obtained recording. It's a trap set by a disgruntled, incompetent employee." "Be quiet, Jason," an older director boomed. "We've already seen the internal memo you had drafted for release tomorrow morning, defaming Ms. Reed. We've also seen the preliminary report from Tanaka Holdings. They walked away because your financial projections were a house of cards, and they suspected insider trading. Your attempt to blame a secretary for your own failures is beneath contempt." One by one, the directors voted. The terminations were unanimous. Security was instructed to escort the three men from the building immediately, their personal effects to be boxed and sent to them. Then Susan turned back to the camera. "Evelyn Reed, on behalf of the board of directors of Viridian Dynamics, I offer our deepest and most sincere apology for the abhorrent way you were treated today. Your 25 years of loyal service were met with a profound betrayal, and we are deeply ashamed. Your position is hereby reinstated, with full back pay and benefits. Furthermore, we are awarding you a substantial settlement for damages, and we will be covering all medical expenses for you and your family, irrespective of insurance." Evelyn felt the air leave her lungs. It was more than she had dared hope for. "But that is merely justice," Susan continued. "It is not gratitude. The board has one more item to vote on. Given the circumstances and given the exceptional courage and integrity you have shown in protecting this company, we would like to offer you a new role. Effective immediately, we are appointing you to the newly created position of Director of Corporate Integrity. You will report directly to the board and have oversight of all ethical and compliance matters. We need your eyes, Evelyn. We need someone who remembers what this company is supposed to be." Tears of relief or validation, of sheer triumph, welled in Evelyn's eyes. She looked at Arthur, who was beaming with pride. She looked back at the screen, at the faces of the directors who were now applauding her softly. "I accept," she said, her voice strong and clear. "Thank you." A week later, Evelyn walked back into Viridian Towers. But this time, there was no cardboard box. She walked with her head held high. The silence that had greeted her exit was now replaced by something else. As she walked through the lobby and toward the executive elevator, employees stopped what they were doing, and one by one, they began to applaud. It started softly, then grew into a thunderous, heartfelt ovation. They knew what she had done. They knew she had fought for them, for the company's soul, and won. She wasn't just a secretary who had been fired. She was a woman who had quietly saved everything. This story reminds us that courage isn't about having no fear. It's about finding the strength to do what's right when everything is on the line. Evelyn Reed's quiet resilience exposed a deep corruption and restored integrity to an entire company. Her story is a powerful testament to the fact that your value isn't defined by a title, but by your character. If this story inspired you, if it reminded you that truth and perseverance can triumph, then do us a favor. Subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell. We bring you real, powerful stories of everyday heroes just like Evelyn every week. Your support helps us share more light in the world. And leave a comment below telling us what you would have done in her situation.